"What is this?" I asked aloud, even though I was completely alone in my living room. 12 files had just arrived on my phone. 12 PDF files that weighed on the screen as if they were stones. My hands were shaking as I tried to focus my eyes on the small letters that appeared next to the attachments. Financing payments, interest rate, bank statement, and underneath all of it, a message from my daughter-in-law, Claire, that said exactly this: "Your son decided. You assume the payment's starting today." I couldn't breathe properly. I read the message once, then again, and again. Each time the words became heavier, more real, more impossible to ignore. My son had decided. Julian had decided that I should pay the installments for his car, and he didn't even have the courage to tell me himself. He sent his wife. He sent her to notify me as if I were an employee receiving orders, as if I were someone who could be disposed of without explanations or consideration. I put the phone down on the table carefully, as if the device might explode at any moment. My fingers wouldn't stop trembling. I felt a lump in my throat that kept me from swallowing. An enormous weight in my chest made it hard to breathe. It wasn't the amount of money that hurt me, although $350 a month for 3 years was no small thing for a woman like me, who made a living mending clothes and sewing custom dresses. It wasn't that. It was the way it was done. It was the contempt. It was the coldness with which they had communicated a decision that changed my life, without even asking me if I could, if I wanted to, if I agreed. I got up from the chair where I had been sewing all afternoon. Mrs. Peterson's dress was left abandoned on the backrest. My legs carried me to the window, almost without thinking. Outside, everything was dark and quiet. The lights of the neighboring houses were off. The street was empty. The world was sleeping while I felt my own world crumbling in silence. I rested my forehead against the cold glass of the window and closed my eyes, trying to find some calm, some clarity in the midst of the confusion that was drowning me. I went back to the table. I picked up the phone again. I opened the first file. It was the financing agreement for a car, a brand new current year model, a well-known make, $42,000 financed over 36 months. Julian's signature was there, clear and legible, next to the date, 6 months ago. 6 months. My son had bought a car half a year ago, and I knew absolutely nothing about it. No one had told me anything. No one had called to tell me. No one had invited me to see it. I didn't even know what color that car was, the one they were now asking me to pay for. I opened the second file. It was the details of the monthly payments. $350 exactly, every 30 days. 12 payments already made. 24 remaining. And according to Claire's message, those 24 payments were now my responsibility, my problem, my burden. As if I had signed that contract. As if I had chosen that car. As if I had made the decision to go into debt for 3 years to have a vehicle I wasn't even going to use. I closed the files. I went back to Claire's message. I looked at her profile picture, her smiling on a beach, wearing big sunglasses, her perfect hair falling over her shoulders, her skin tanned. An image of happiness and carelessness. And there I was, at 11:30 at night, trembling in my small living room, trying to understand how I had reached this point. How my son, the boy who had grown up in this very house, the young man who used to hug me and tell me I was his hero, had turned into a man capable of doing something like this. I didn't answer her that night. I couldn't. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know whether to scream, to cry, to beg for an explanation, or to just delete the message and pretend nothing had happened. But I knew pretending was useless. The files were there. The message was there. The reality was there, brutal and clear, staring me in the face without mercy. My son had decided that I should pay for his decisions, and his wife had taken it upon herself to inform me with all the warmth of a utility bill. I sat down again. My hands searched for the cup of tea I had made hours ago. The liquid was cold. I drank it anyway. I needed to do something with my hands, with my mouth, with my body that didn't know how to process everything I was feeling: rage, sadness, disappointment, humiliation, all mixed in a whirlwind that churned my stomach and made me feel dizzy. I thought about calling him, picking up the phone and dialing his number, hearing his voice, asking him directly what all this meant. Why hadn't he spoken to me? Why had he allowed his wife to treat me this way? Why was he doing this to me after everything I had done for him? But I didn't. Something inside me stopped me. A small voice telling me that if Julian had wanted to talk to me, he would have. If he had wanted to explain, he would have called me himself. The fact that he sent Claire was an answer in itself. I opened the drawer of the dresser that was next to the living room entrance. In it, I kept an old notebook where I wrote down all my expenses, all the loans I gave, all the help I offered. I turned the pages slowly, reading my own notes in shaky handwriting. January, $300 for Julian's apartment deposit. He had told me he would pay me back the following month. He never did. April, $500 for Claire's laptop, which had supposedly broken down right before an important presentation at her job. She promised me she would pay me back in 15 days. She never did either. June, $200 for a gift Claire wanted to buy for a close friend. She assured me it was the last time she would ask me for anything. A lie. I closed the notebook, feeling the nausea rise in my throat. More than $1,000 in less than 6 months. Money that I had given without hesitation because it was my son who was asking. Because that's what mothers do. They give, they help, they sacrifice. Even when they don't have much. Even when that money means not buying something for themselves. Even when it means working more hours, sewing more dresses, taking on more orders even though your fingers already ache and your eyesight isn't what it used to be. And now this. Now they were asking me to take on the payments for a car I didn't even know existed. A car my son had bought without consulting me. A car he probably used to drive around with Claire, to go to nice places, to project the lifestyle that mattered so much to them. And I was supposed to pay for it. I was supposed to sacrifice once more. I was supposed to shut up and accept it, because in the end, that's what I had always done. But something was different that night. Something had changed inside me as I looked at those files, as I read that cold and calculating message, as I remembered all the unpaid loans and all the broken promises. I felt a strange, almost painful clarity, as if a blindfold I had been wearing for years had finally fallen off, and now I could see the whole truth, without filters, without excuses, without justifications. The truth was that my son had been using me. The truth was that Claire despised me. The truth was that for them, I was not a mother worthy of respect, but a convenient resource they could tap into when they needed it. And the most painful part of all was realizing that this hadn't started tonight. This had been happening for a long time. I had simply refused to see it. I turned off the living room light and walked to my bedroom. I lay down on the bed without even changing my clothes. The phone remained on the nightstand, with Claire's message still unanswered. I closed my eyes, but I knew I wasn't going to sleep. My mind was already working, remembering, connecting moments I had let pass, signs I had ignored, patterns I had excused. Tomorrow would be another day, and tomorrow I would begin to see the whole story. Because if there was one thing I had learned in 62 years of life, it was this. When pain arrives this way, so direct and so cruel, it's because there is nothing left to hide. I didn't sleep that night. I lay staring at my bedroom ceiling for hours, watching the darkness slowly turn into the first gray tones of dawn. My mind couldn't stop. Every time I closed my eyes, images appeared, memories, moments that at the time seemed insignificant but now, seen all together, formed a clear and painful pattern. It hadn't been a single blow. It had been a slow process, a gradual exclusion, an erasure from my life so subtle that I hadn't realized it myself until it was too late. The first memory that came was of my birthday last year, 61 years old. I woke up that morning with a foolish hope in my chest. I thought that maybe Julian would come to visit me. Maybe he would take me to breakfast as he used to do when he was younger. Maybe we would spend the day together like in the old days. I made extra coffee. I bought pastries from the corner bakery. I put on my best dress, the light blue one he had always liked. I fixed my hair. I put on a little makeup. I waited. The hours passed. 9 in the morning, 10, 11, noon. The phone didn't ring. No message arrived. Nothing. At 2 in the afternoon, Margot came by to visit me with a small cake she had baked herself. She sang, "Happy birthday" to me. She hugged me, and I smiled and thanked her while inside my soul was breaking because my own friend had remembered my birthday but my son had not. At 6 in the evening, when I had already lost all hope, a message arrived from Julian. It said, "Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry for not calling. Very busy day. Love you." That was it. 9 words. Not a phone call. Not a visit. Not even a voice memo so I could hear his voice. I told myself it was okay, that he had work, that his life was complicated, that Claire probably had commitments too. I found every possible excuse, because that's what I did. I made excuses. I justified. I turned neglect into understanding. But now, lying in my bed at 3 in the morning, I saw that forgotten birthday for what it really was, the beginning of something I didn't want to see. Then came the memory of Christmas. Last Christmas, December of the previous year, I had prepared everything. I had cooked for 2 days. I had made the turkey that Julian loved so much. I had prepared the stuffing from my mother's recipe. I had baked cookies. I had decorated the house with the few things I had. I had bought a small gift for Claire, a nice scarf I had seen at the market, and for Julian, a shirt I had been saving up for months to buy. The table was set, the dishes served, the candles lit. I waited. I had told them dinner was at 8. At 8:30, I was still waiting. At 9, I called Julian. He didn't answer. I texted him. Nothing. At 9:30, I called again. This time he answered. I heard music in the background. Laughter. Voices. He told me they were at Claire's parents' house. That he had forgotten to tell me. That they had decided to spend Christmas there because her family was large and they had a big celebration. He told me he was very sorry. That next year he would come to me no matter what. I hung up the phone. I looked at the table full of food that no one was going to eat. The candles slowly burning down. The gifts wrapped with so much care. And I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried in years. But afterward, I dried my tears. I put away the food. I blew out the candles, and I convinced myself that it had been a misunderstanding, that next year would be different, that my son wouldn't forget me again. But he did. This year, he didn't even invite me. He didn't even pretend there were plans with me. He simply spent Christmas with Claire's family, and I found out from the photos I saw on Facebook. Photos where everyone was smiling around a huge table, Julian in a Santa hat, Claire hugging her mother, the cousins, the uncles, everyone, except me. I wasn't in any photo because I hadn't been there. I got out of bed because I couldn't stand lying there anymore with these memories crushing my chest. I went to the kitchen. I heated water for tea. While I waited for it to boil, I kept remembering. The pieces kept appearing, one after another, as if someone had opened a floodgate and now everything was pouring out uncontrollably. I remembered my cousin Megan's daughter's christening. About 8 months ago, I had mentioned the event to Julian. I told him it would be nice to go together, that we hadn't attended something as a family in a long time. He told me yes, that of course he would go with me. The day of the christening, I got ready early. I put on my best dress. I waited for him to pick me up as we had agreed. I waited for an hour, 2 hours. I called him. He didn't answer. I texted him. Nothing. I finally had to take the bus alone. I arrived late to the church. When the ceremony ended and we went to Megan's house for the meal, I checked my phone. There was a message from Julian, sent 3 hours after he was supposed to pick me up. It said, "Sorry, Mom. Something came up with Claire. I can't make it. Say hi to the family for me." At that moment, I felt ashamed. I had to explain to everyone why I had arrived alone. I had to make excuses for Julian, say he had work, that he was busy, that he sent his regards. And everyone looked at me with that expression that hurts more than any word. That mix of pity and understanding that makes you feel small and foolish. The water boiled. I made my tea. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Julian had eaten breakfast throughout his childhood. The same table where we did homework together when he was in elementary school. The same table where he told me his dreams, his fears, his plans for the future. Now that table was just mine, and it was far too big for me. I kept remembering because I couldn't stop anymore. I remembered all the times I had texted him to ask how he was, and he would reply days later with short, cold messages. I remembered all the times I had offered to visit him, and he would tell me it wasn't a good time, that their apartment was under repair, that Claire was very stressed with work, that we'd see each other another day that never came. I remembered all the times I had seen photos on his social media of meals at expensive restaurants, of trips to the beach, of parties with friends, while he was telling me he didn't even have time for a 10-minute call. I remembered Mother's Day this year. He sent me flowers, a beautiful arrangement with a card that said, "For the best mom, I love you, Julian." The flowers arrived by delivery. He didn't come. He didn't call. He just sent flowers as if that were enough, as if a floral arrangement could replace his presence, as if the money he spent on roses could make up for the fact that he didn't want to spend even 1 hour with me on my day. I took a sip of tea. It was so hot it burned my tongue, but I didn't care. The physical pain was almost a relief compared to the pain I felt in my chest. Because now I understood. Now I saw everything clearly. It hadn't been carelessness. It hadn't been forgetfulness. It had been intentional, a systematic exclusion, a planned withdrawal. And I had facilitated everything by being understanding, by being patient, by being the mother who always understands and forgives. I thought about all the times Julian had asked me for money. It was never much. $100 here, $200 there, $50 for this, $300 for that. Always urgent, always with promises of repayment, never fulfilled. And I always gave, even if it meant not buying my medication, even if it meant eating less so the food would last, even if it meant working twice as hard. Because he was my son, because mothers help, because I thought that's what kept me connected to him. Now I realized that the only thing that kept me connected to Julian was my usefulness. When he needed me for money, I was there. When he needed me to watch something, I was there. When he needed a favor, I was there. But when it came to sharing his life, including me in his important moments, treating me like what I was, his mother, there was no longer room for me. The sky outside was beginning to lighten. Soon it would be a new day. People would start to wake up. Margot was probably already making her coffee. The neighbors would leave for work. The neighborhood would come back to life. And I would still be here, in my kitchen, trying to understand how I had allowed this to happen, how I had let them treat me this way, how I had normalized abandonment until it became acceptable. I picked up my phone. I opened Claire's message again. The 12 files were still there. The car payments, $350 a month. And that sentence that now hurt even more after remembering everything else. Your son decided. You assume the payments starting today. It wasn't just the car. It was everything else. It was the forgotten birthday. It was the Christmas in solitude. It was the christening I went to alone. It was the Mother's Day with flowers, but no presents. It was every unanswered message. It was every canceled visit. It was every invented excuse. It was every moment I chose to believe the lie because the truth hurt too much. But now the truth was here, complete, impossible to ignore. And although it hurt like nothing had ever hurt before, there was also something liberating in finally seeing it, in stopping the justifications, in stopping the excuses, in stopping being the mother who understands everything and accepts everything, no matter how much they hurt her. I finished my tea. I sat there as the sun rose completely and the light poured through the kitchen window, illuminating this house that suddenly felt emptier than ever, and I knew that something had to change. I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't keep waiting for a son who clearly no longer wanted me in his life, other than as a solution to his financial problems. But I still didn't know what to do. I still didn't know how to respond. I only knew that this time I wasn't going to act out of desperation or fear of losing him. Because the truth was, I had already lost him. And now I had to decide if I wanted to remain invisible in my own story, or if it was finally time to make myself seen. 3 days passed before I answered Claire's message. 3 days in which I did nothing but think, remember, and think again. Margot came to visit me on the second day because she noticed I hadn't left the house. She brought me soup and bread. She sat with me at the kitchen table and asked me what was wrong. I told her everything. I showed her the message, the files, the car payments. She shook her head and squeezed my hand tightly, her eyes filling with tears of rage for me. She told me Julian was ungrateful, that Claire was a snake, that I didn't deserve this, that I had to refuse, that I had to stand my ground, that I had to tell them no. And I listened to her. I nodded. I thanked her for her support. But deep down, I knew things weren't that simple. It wasn't just about saying no to the car payments. It was about something much deeper. It was about accepting that the relationship with my son was broken, that maybe it had always been broken, and I had simply refused to see it. During those 3 days, I also did something I had never done before. I checked Julian's social media. Normally, I only went on Facebook to see pictures of my friends' children or to look for recipes. But this time, I dedicated myself to looking at my son's entire profile. Every photo, every post, every comment. And what I found finished breaking what little was left whole inside me. There were birthday photos, not mine. Claire's, a big party at an elegant restaurant, balloons, a multi-tiered cake, friends toasting, Julian with his arm around her waist. The comments said things like, "The best wife in the world," and "Happy birthday, my love." The post had over 200 likes. It had been 2 months ago. The same month I turned 62, and he only sent me a 9-word text. There were photos of trips, to the beach, to the mountains, to cities I had only seen on television. Julian and Claire smiling in front of beautiful sunsets, eating on terraces overlooking the ocean, walking down cobblestone streets that looked like something out of a movie. Every trip documented with dozens of photos, every moment captured, every experience shared with the whole world. Except me. He never told me about those trips. I found out through the photos, through the images that appeared on my screen, showing me a life I was not a part of. There were photos of family gatherings, but of Claire's family, Sunday dinners at her parents' house, Christmases, holidays, Julian always present, always smiling, always integrated, as if that were his only family, as if I didn't exist, as if there wasn't a mother somewhere waiting for even a phone call. And what hurt me the most were the recent photos. From 3 weeks ago, a post where Julian was showing off his new car, the car they were now asking me to pay for, a silver vehicle, recent model, shiny. He was posing next to it with a huge smile. The post said, "New member of the family, hard work and dreams come true." The comments congratulated him, told him he deserved it, that he was a successful man, that he should be proud. Hard work, it said. Dreams come true. But now it turned out that I was the one who was going to pay for that dream come true, with the money I earned sewing dresses until my fingers ached, with the extra hours I worked to cover my own expenses. That was his hard work. Signing a contract he knew he couldn't pay and passing the bill to his mother. I closed Facebook. I put the phone aside. I felt sick, dizzy, as if I had been watching a stranger's life. Because that man in the photos was not the son I remembered. Or maybe he was, and I just never wanted to accept it. Maybe he had always been like this, and I had been so busy being the perfect mother that I never stopped to see who he really was. On the 3rd day, I made a decision. I was not going to pay the car installments. Not because I couldn't. Technically, I could if I stopped eating well, if I stopped buying my medication, if I worked 3 times as hard. But I wasn't going to do it, because doing so would mean accepting that my only value to my son was financial. It would mean telling him he could keep using me, that he could keep disrespecting me, that he could keep erasing me from his life, except when he needed me to solve his problems. But I wasn't just going to say no either. That would be too easy for them, too simple. They could turn me into the villain, the selfish mother who wouldn't help her son, the bitter woman who ruined their plans. No. If I was going to refuse, I was going to do it right. I was going to do it in a way that made it completely clear why I was doing it. So I replied to the message. After 3 days of silence, I wrote exactly this. "Claire, I received the documents. I need to speak with Julian. Have him call me when he can." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just asked to speak to my son. Because if he had made this decision, he should have the courage to tell me to my face, or at least to my voice. He shouldn't hide behind his wife. The reply came 2 hours later. Not from Julian. From Claire again. It said, "Julian is very busy with work. He doesn't have time for calls. I already informed you of the decision. The payments start next month. I'll send you the bank account details." I read the message 3 times. Each time, I got angrier. But it was a cold anger, calm. It wasn't the kind of rage that makes you scream or break things. It was something more dangerous. It was absolute clarity. I wrote back, "I understand. Regardless, I need to hear it from him. He is my son. If he has made this decision, I want him to tell me himself. I will wait for his call." I sent the message. I knew I was making them uncomfortable. I knew that Claire was probably showing the messages to Julian right at that moment. I imagined his annoyed face, his frustration that I wasn't being the submissive mother I had always been, the one who accepts everything without question. A full day passed. Nothing. Not a call. Not a text from Julian. Just another message from Claire that said, "Mrs. Chavez, I've already explained the situation. I don't understand why you're complicating things. It's only $350 a month. For you, living alone and without major expenses, it should be manageable." I felt my blood boil when I read that. For me, living alone and without major expenses. As if she knew anything about my life. As if she had any idea how much it cost to survive on what I earned. As if my blood pressure medication didn't cost money. As if food were free. As if the roof of my house didn't have leaks that needed repairing. I didn't reply to her. Instead, I did something different. I called Julian directly. His phone rang 5 times before he answered. When I heard his voice, something tightened in my chest. "Mom," he said. He sounded uncomfortable, nervous. Like a child who knows he did something wrong and is waiting to be scolded. "Julian," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need us to talk. About the car. About the payments Claire says I have to make." There was a long, awkward silence. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, it's just, things are complicated right now. We had some unexpected expenses, and the car payments are getting heavy for us. We thought you could help us out. Just temporarily, until our situation improves." His voice sounded rehearsed, as if he had practiced those words, as if Claire were right there next to him, telling him what to say. "You thought?" I asked. "Or you decided without asking me?" Another silence. "It's the same thing, Mom. We knew you'd understand. You've always been there for me." Those words. "You've always been there for me." As if that were reason enough, as if my entire existence was reduced to being there for him, to solve, to pay, to make his life easier. "Julian," I said slowly, measuring every word. "Do you know when the last time we saw each other was?" Silence. "Do you know what day today is?" More silence. "Do you remember my last birthday?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Because he didn't remember. Because I wasn't important in his life beyond what I could give him. "It's been 4 months since you came to see me. 6 months since you bought that car and didn't tell me anything. A year since you spent a Christmas with me. But now you remember me. Now I exist. Because you need money." "Mom, it's not like that," he said, and for the first time I heard some genuine emotion in his voice. Defensiveness. "I've been busy. You know how work is. Claire has a lot of responsibilities too. It's not that I don't want to see you. It's just that time. Time is—" I interrupted him. "There's always time. For what you want to make time for. You have time to travel, to go to restaurants, to spend Sundays with Claire's family. But you don't have time for your mother." The call became tense. I could hear his breathing on the other end. I could imagine his face, probably red, probably annoyed that I was confronting him, that I wasn't being the understanding mother from always. "You know what, Julian?" I said finally. "I'm going to think about it. I'm going to think about whether I want to pay those installments. And while I'm thinking, I want you to think too. Think about when the last time was that you treated me like your mother and not like your personal bank. Think about that, and then we'll talk." I hung up before he could reply. My hands were shaking. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something resembling dignity. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't cried, I hadn't begged. I had only told the truth, and the truth hurt. But it hurt less than continuing to lie to myself. I sat on the living room sofa. I took a deep breath. I knew this was just the beginning. I knew Julian would probably tell Claire everything, that she would get angry, that they would try to manipulate me in some other way. But something had changed inside me. I had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. For the first time, I was setting boundaries. For the first time, I was telling my son that he couldn't treat me just any way he pleased. And even though I didn't know how this would all end, I knew I had done the right thing. Because a mother who lets herself be walked on doesn't teach her son anything good. She only teaches him that he can keep on walking. And I had been walked on enough. 2 days after that call with Julian, someone knocked on my door. It was 10 in the morning. I was sewing the hem of a skirt when I heard the knocks. Firm, insistent. It wasn't the way Margot knocked. She always knocked twice gently and then called my name. This was different. I left the needle on the table and went to open it, my heart beating a little faster than usual. On the other side was a man I had never seen before. He must have been in his late 60s, well-dressed, gray suit, understated tie, gray hair combed back, thin-rimmed glasses. He looked at me with a serious but not threatening expression. He was carrying a leather briefcase in his right hand. "Mrs. Eleanor Chavez?" he asked in a clear voice. I nodded without opening the door completely. I still had the security chain on. "I'm Damien Nash, an attorney. I need to speak with you about a delicate matter related to your daughter-in-law, Claire Mercer." I froze. An attorney. Talking about Claire. 1,000 thoughts crossed my mind in seconds. Had she done something wrong? Were they suing me? Was it about the car payments? Had they escalated to this so quickly? "I don't understand," I said with a trembling voice. "What do you want?" The man held up a hand in a calming gesture. "Don't worry, ma'am. I'm not here to bring you trouble. Quite the opposite. I'm here to warn you. May we speak inside? It's important, and I'd prefer this conversation to be private." He hesitated. Every instinct told me not to let a stranger into my house. But something in his eyes conveyed trust. Or maybe it was my desperation. Maybe I needed to know what he had to say. I unhooked the chain. I let him pass. I closed the door behind him. I led him to the living room. He sat on the sofa after I indicated he could. He placed the briefcase on his lap. I sat in the chair across from him. I waited. "Mrs. Chavez," he began, adjusting his glasses. "3 years ago, I represented a woman named Tanya Miller in her divorce proceedings. That woman was married to a man named Adrian Mercer. Adrian is the younger brother of Claire, your daughter-in-law." He paused. He looked me straight in the eyes. "During that divorce, we discovered a very specific pattern in the Mercer family, particularly with Claire, a pattern of financial manipulation and systematic isolation of in-laws." I felt the air leave my lungs. "What are you saying?" I asked. Damien opened his briefcase. He took out a folder. He placed it on the coffee table between us. "Claire was married before she met your son. Her first husband was named Clayton Roberts. They divorced 6 years ago. During that marriage, Claire convinced Clayton to completely cut off his relationship with his mother. The woman was so affected she ended up in psychological therapy. Claire also managed all the marriage's finances. When they divorced, Clayton discovered she had been diverting money to personal accounts, thousands of dollars he never knew existed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "Why are you coming to tell me?" Damien sighed. He took off his glasses. He cleaned them with a handkerchief he took from his pocket. "Because 2 years ago, when I was going through the most difficult time of my life, you helped me. You probably don't remember me. I used to live in this neighborhood. My wife had died. I lost my job. I was in a terrible depression. I stopped paying my rent. I was going to end up on the street. One day, you saw me sitting on the sidewalk. You brought me into your house. You gave me food. You listened to me. And when you learned my situation, you loaned me money without even knowing me. $500, which for you was probably all you had. You told me to pay you back when I could, not to worry." I started to remember. A thin man, sad eyes, wrinkled clothes, sitting outside the house 3 doors down. Yes, I remembered him. I had given him soup, bread. We had talked. He told me his story. And yes, I loaned him money. He never paid me back. I never saw him again. I thought he had left the neighborhood. You, I said, surprised. Yes, ma'am. Me. That money allowed me to get a room while I found work. Eventually, I recovered. I went back to practicing law, and I always wanted to pay you back. I always wanted to repay what you did for me. But when I came back to this neighborhood to look for you, I discovered something that alarmed me. He leaned forward. His expression grew more serious. 1 month ago, a client came to my office. She wanted legal advice on how to protect her assets from her daughter-in-law. During the consultation, she mentioned the name Claire Mercer. I started digging, and I discovered that Claire has a history, a pattern. She marries men who have single mothers, widowed or divorced mothers, mothers with some money saved or with property. Slowly, she isolates them from their sons. She turns them into strangers. And when she has them completely shut out, she starts extracting resources. He opened the folder. He showed me documents, printouts, screenshots. Here is the case of Clayton's mother, her first husband. Here is my client Tanya's, Claire's sister-in-law. And here, he took out another set of papers. Recent information on your son Julian's finances. He showed me bank statements. I didn't understand how he had gotten them, but there they were. Strange movements. Large transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Frequent withdrawals. Your son is being financially drained, and Claire is preparing the ground to do the same to you. I got up from the chair. I needed to move, to walk, to process what I was hearing. Why? I asked. Why would she do something like this? Damien put the documents away. Some people just operate this way, ma'am. People who see relationships as transactions. Claire comes from a family where money and status are everything. Her mother is the same. Her father, too. She learned from a young age that people are tools, and her husband's mothers are particularly useful tools. First, because money can be easily extracted from them by appealing to their maternal love. Second, because once she completely isolates them, she can take any property or inheritance without interference. I sat down again. My legs wouldn't hold me. What do you want me to do? I asked in a weak voice. I want you to protect yourself, he replied. I want you to understand that this isn't going to end with the car payments. It will continue. They will keep asking you for money. They will keep inventing emergencies. And in the meantime, Claire will keep pulling Julian away from you until he reaches a point where he doesn't answer your calls, doesn't visit, doesn't care. And when you are no longer useful, when you have nothing left to give, they will abandon you completely. I felt nauseous. How do I stop this? Damien closed his briefcase. He stood up. First, do not pay those installments. Second, keep a record of everything. Every message, every request for money, every interaction. Third, if you have property or savings, protect them legally, make a will, establish clauses. And fourth, he looked at me with a serious expression. Prepare to confront, because the only way to break this pattern is to expose it, to make Julian see what is happening, and that is not going to be easy. He gave me a card. This is my number. Call me if you need legal help. I won't charge you. I owe you. That money you loaned me saved my life. Now I want to help you save yours. He headed to the door. Before leaving, he turned around. One more thing, ma'am. Be very careful. Claire is smart. She's calculating. If she senses you are a threat, she will act. She will turn Julian completely against you. She will invent stories. She will manipulate the situation so that you look like the villain. Do not underestimate what she is capable of doing. And with that, he left. I closed the door behind him. I stood in the entryway for I don't know how long, staring at the card in my hand, processing everything I had just heard. My daughter-in-law wasn't just an unpleasant woman, she was a professional manipulator, a predator. And my son was her victim as much as I was. The question was, what was I going to do with this information? How was I going to use what I now knew? And whether I would have the courage to face what was coming. After Damien left, I sat on the sofa for hours. The card he had given me was on the table. I looked at it from time to time as if it might disappear, as if that whole conversation had been a dream. But it wasn't. It was real. And now I had to decide what to do with that information. I couldn't just sit still, not after knowing this was part of a pattern, that my son was being manipulated just like the other men before him. The next day, I called Damien. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Chavez," he said. His voice was professional but warm. "I need your help," I told him directly. "I need proof. I need something concrete I can show Julian so he can see what's happening." There was a pause. Then I heard papers shuffling on the other end. "I understand. Can you come to my office tomorrow? There are things I need to show you. And I need you to bring everything you have. Messages, emails, any communication with Claire or your son related to money." That night, I didn't sleep preparing everything. I printed every WhatsApp conversation with Claire, every message where they asked for money. I took out my old notebook where I wrote down the loans. I searched my email. I found 3 emails from Claire from months ago asking for help for different things. Always with the same tone, always urgent, always with promises of repayment that were never fulfilled. I put everything in a folder. I felt like a detective preparing a case. The next morning, I took the bus downtown. Damien's office was in an old but well-maintained building. 3rd floor. A young receptionist greeted me and showed me in. Damien was sitting behind a dark wood desk. There were papers everywhere, law books on the shelves, a computer was on. He offered me coffee. I accepted, even though my hands were already shaking enough without caffeine. "Mrs. Chavez," he began, reviewing the documents I had brought. "This is very useful, very useful. There's a clear pattern here of requests for money with no repayment. But we need more. We need proof of what Claire is doing with Julian's finances." He showed me his screen. He had a document open with financial information. "I have a contact at the bank where your son has his main account. I can't get official information without a court order, but I can get general data, suspicious movements, that sort of thing." For the next few days, Damien worked like a private investigator. I didn't know lawyers did this kind of thing. He explained that normally they didn't, but that this case was personal for him, that he wanted to help me as I had helped him, and that besides, there was something about Claire's way of operating that deeply angered him. "I've seen many cases of financial abuse in my career," he told me one afternoon. "But this is different. This is systematic, calculated. She knows exactly what she's doing." A week later, he called me to come back to his office. When I arrived, he had a thick folder on his desk. I sat down across from him. My heart was beating so hard, I felt it would burst from my chest. "I found several things," he said, opening the folder. "First, Claire has 3 bank accounts that Julian doesn't know about. In 2 of them, there are regular deposits that match withdrawals from the joint account they share. We're talking about approximately $2,000 a month that she is diverting without his knowledge." He showed me printouts, numbers, dates, transfers. My head was spinning, trying to understand it all. "Second," he continued, "the car they asked you to pay the installments for. The financing is only in Julian's name. But it turns out Claire has another car, a car she bought 4 months ago, paid in cash. $35,000. Where did she get that money if they supposedly have financial problems?" I felt the rage rise in my throat. "She's stealing from him," I said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Damien nodded. "Technically, it's not theft because they have shared access to the accounts. But it's misappropriation. It's financial manipulation. And it's exactly what she did to her first husband." He took out more papers. "Third, and this is the most serious. Claire has an apartment registered in her name. She bought it 2 years ago. Approximate value $120,000. She's renting that apartment. She receives $1,200 a month in rent. Money she never mentions. Money that goes straight into one of her secret accounts." I couldn't believe it. "Julian doesn't know any of this?" Damien shook his head. "I highly doubt it. If he knew, they wouldn't be asking you for money for his car payments. The truth, ma'am, is that Claire has built a small financial empire behind your son's back. And meanwhile, she has him convinced that they're in financial trouble, that they need help, that they have expenses they can't cover. I leaned back in the chair. I felt like the room was spinning. What else? I asked. I knew there was more. I could see it in his eyes. Damien took a deep breath. There's something else. And this is delicate. He took out his phone. He showed me photos. Photos of Claire with a man who was not my son. Entering a restaurant, leaving a hotel, embracing in a park. She's having a relationship with someone else. A man named Arthur Vance. A businessman. Married, too. They see each other regularly, 2 or 3 times a week. I felt short of breath. She wasn't just stealing from Julian. She was also being unfaithful to him. Since when? I asked with a trembling voice. At least a year. Maybe more. My investigator couldn't confirm exactly when it started, but it's an established relationship. It's not something casual. He put his phone back in his pocket. Mrs. Chavez, your son is being used in every possible way. Financially, emotionally. Claire doesn't love him. She probably never did. She chose him because he was a good prospect. Stable job. Single mother she could play with. A manageable personality. I closed my eyes. I tried not to cry. But the tears came anyway. They weren't tears for me. They were for Julian. For my son who thought he was in a real marriage. Who thought he had a wife who loved him. Who worked hard every day, not knowing he was being hollowed out from the inside. Damien passed me a box of tissues. He waited in silence while I cried. When I could finally speak, I asked, "What do I do with all this?" Damien gathered all the documents. He organized them carefully. First, you decide if you want to tell Julian, because once you open this box, there's no going back. His life is going to change completely. It's going to hurt. It's going to be devastating for him. But it's also the only way to free him. He looked me straight in the eyes. Second, if you decide to confront them, do it intelligently. Don't go in emotionally. Don't yell. Don't accuse without proof. Present the facts. Show the documents. Let the evidence speak. He gave me a copy of everything. Another thick folder full of papers documenting the betrayal. Keep this in a safe place and think it over. Take a few days. This is not a decision to be made lightly. He walked me to the door of his office. Before I left, he put a hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Chavez, you saved me when I had nothing. You gave me dignity when I felt less than nothing. Now let me help you get yours back. And help your son get his life back. I went home on the bus with the folder clutched to my chest. I looked out the window without really seeing anything. My mind was somewhere else. Thinking, planning. The old Eleanor would have hidden that folder and never used it. She would have been afraid of making waves, of causing trouble, of losing her son completely. But the woman who got off that bus was no longer the same. I had crossed a point of no return. I got home. I put the folder in the safest place I had, under the mattress of my bed. Primitive, perhaps, but effective. I sat at the kitchen table. I took out paper and a pen. And I started to write. I needed to organize my thoughts. I needed to make a plan, because now I had the proof. I had the whole truth. And I had to decide exactly how and when I was going to use all of it. It wasn't going to be immediate. It wasn't going to be impulsive. It was going to be calculated, measured. I was going to wait for the right moment. The moment when I could confront them in a way they couldn't escape, that they couldn't deny, that they couldn't turn against me. Because Damien was right. Claire was smart. She was manipulative. If I rushed, if I did it wrong, I could end up being the villain of this story. So I was going to plan. I was going to prepare. And when the time finally came to face them, I was going to be ready. With every piece of proof, with every document, with every word rehearsed. Because this was no longer just about the payments for a car. This was about saving my son from a woman who was slowly destroying him. And about reclaiming my dignity as a mother. 2 weeks passed before I made the final decision. 2 weeks in which I reread every document Damien had given me. 2 weeks in which I mentally rehearsed what I was going to say, how I was going to say it, where I was going to do it. Because I knew this conversation had to be perfect. There could be no mistakes. There could be no room for Claire to manipulate the situation. It had to be in a place where I had control, where they couldn't easily escape, where they would have to listen to me until the end. I decided it would be in my house, on my territory, here where Julian had grown up, where he had learned to walk, where he had celebrated his birthdays, where photos of him still hung on the walls. This was my space, and here I was going to confront them. But I couldn't just invite them over and tell them a confrontation was coming. They had to come without suspicion. They had to feel comfortable, confident, and for that, I needed a perfect pretext. The opportunity came when Claire sent me another message. This time it wasn't about the car payments, it was about a loan. They needed $1,200 to repair something in their apartment, a major leak that had damaged a wall. She said it was urgent, that if they didn't fix it soon, it would get worse, that they would pay me back in 2 months. The same old promises, the same pattern. But this time, instead of refusing or ignoring the message, I saw an opportunity. I replied that yes, that I had that money saved, that I could lend it to them, but that I wanted to give it to them in person, that I wanted to see them, that I wanted to talk to them about everything, about the car payments too, about our relationship, about the future. I told her I had been thinking a lot and that I needed them to come to my house for dinner, that I wanted to fix things, that I missed my son, that I wanted us to be a family again. Claire's reply came quickly, too quickly. Of course they would come. They thought it was an excellent idea. Julian agreed too. Could they come on Saturday night? At 7 o'clock? Perfect, I replied. I'll expect you at that time. And so it was set. The trap was laid. I just needed to prepare it well. For the next few days, I dedicated myself to planning every detail. I called Damien. I told him my plan. At first, he hesitated. He told me it was risky to do all this alone, that he should be present. But I explained that if a lawyer was there, Claire would suspect immediately. She would get defensive. She might leave before I could show Julian everything. No, it had to be just the three of us. Mother, son, daughter-in-law, a family dinner. Damien finally agreed, but he made me promise to call him afterward, to let him know how everything went. On Friday afternoon, I went to the market. I bought everything I needed to make Julian's favorite dinner: roast chicken with potatoes, a fresh salad, freshly baked bread, and for dessert, the apple pie he loved so much as a child. I spent more than I should have, but I didn't care. This dinner had to be perfect. It had to remind Julian of everything I had done for him, all the love I had put into every meal, into every detail of his upbringing. On Saturday, I got up early. I cleaned the entire house. I swept. I mopped. I dusted every piece of furniture. I arranged the photos of Julian in the living room, the ones from when he was a baby, from his graduation, from his birthdays. I wanted him to see his history when he walked in. Our history. I wanted him to remember who he was before Claire. I set the table with the tablecloth I had embroidered years ago. I took out the good dishes that I only used on special occasions. I placed fresh flowers in the center. At 3 in the afternoon, I started cooking. While I prepared the food, I mentally reviewed what I was going to say. I had written notes. I had memorized them. I knew exactly when I was going to pull out each document, in what order I was going to present the evidence. First, the messages, showing the pattern of money requests. Then, the bank statements, showing Claire's secret accounts. Next, the documents for the apartment she had hidden. And finally, the photos with the other man. Each piece of evidence was going to land like a hammer, one after another, without giving them time to recover. I put all the documents in a folder, which I placed inside the kitchen cabinet, within arm's reach, ready to be taken out at the right moment. I also made copies. I left them with Margot. I explained everything. I told her that if anything went wrong, if Claire tried to take the originals from me, or if anything strange happened, she had backups. Margot hugged me tight. She told me I was the bravest woman she knew, that she admired what I was doing, that she would be on alert all night. By 6:30, I was ready. I had put on my best dress, the green one that suited me. I had fixed my hair. A little makeup. I wanted to look dignified. I wanted to look strong. Not like a desperate mother, but like a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I looked myself in the eyes. I took a deep breath. You can do this, Eleanor, I told myself. You can do this. At 7 o'clock sharp, I heard the car park outside. My heart began to beat faster. I heard the car doors close, footsteps on the walkway, voices, Julian's, Claire's. They were approaching. I took another deep breath. I dried my hands on my apron. I walked to the door. Before opening it, I closed my eyes for a second. For my son, I thought. I'm doing this for my son. And I opened. Julian was standing there with an awkward smile. He looked tired. Dark circles under his eyes. Thinner than I remembered. He was wearing a shirt I didn't recognize. Dark pants. Bluish. Claire. Perfect as always. Flawless makeup. A fitted dress. High heels. A designer bag. A fake smile. Hi, Mom, Julian said. He leaned in to give me a kiss on the cheek. He smelled different, like an expensive cologne that Claire had probably bought him. Hello, son, I replied. I hugged him, maybe a little tighter than normal, maybe holding on for an extra second. Because I didn't know what our relationship would be like after tonight. Hello, Eleanor, Claire said with that sweet voice she used when she needed something. It smells lovely. I made chicken. I nodded. Julian's favorite. I had them come in. We closed the door behind us. They sat in the living room while I finished serving dinner. I could hear them talking. Superficial conversation, the traffic, the weather, unimportant things. When everything was ready, I called them to the table. They sat down. Julian in his usual spot. To my right. Claire across from him, me at the head. I served the plates. I offered them wine. I only had a cheap bottle I'd bought at the market, but it was enough. For the first few minutes, we ate in relative silence. Julian ate eagerly. You could tell he missed my cooking. Claire picked at her food. She moved the food around on her plate more than she ate, probably thinking about the calories, her perfect figure, keeping up appearances. This is delicious, Mom, Julian said. It's been so long since I've had your chicken. I looked at him. I smiled. You should come by more often then. He looked down. Yeah, you're right. I've just been so busy. I know, I said softly. Work, responsibilities. Adult life is complicated. Claire chimed in. Exactly. Julian works so hard. He comes home so tired, he barely has time for anything. I looked at her. I kept my expression neutral. It must be difficult, working so hard and still having money problems. There was a pause, barely perceptible, but I noticed it. Well, Claire said, they're not serious problems, just some unexpected expenses. That's why we really appreciate you helping us with the loan. I nodded. I took a sip of wine. Of course, the loan. The $1,200. And the car payments too. $350 a month. Julian shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mom, about that, I wanted to explain. It wasn't our intention to pressure you. It's just that things got complicated, and we thought maybe you could help out. Temporarily. Temporarily, I repeated. Like the $300 from January that were temporary, and the $500 from April, and the $200 from June. The atmosphere at the table changed. It became tense. Julian stopped eating. Claire was watching me with narrowed eyes. Eleanor, she said in a controlled voice, if you're going to hold every bit of help we've asked for over our heads, maybe we shouldn't be here. Oh no, I said calmly. It's not a complaint. I'm just remembering. Because memory is important. Remembering helps us see patterns, to understand how we got where we are. I stood up. Does anyone want more wine? They both shook their heads. Good. It was time. It was now or never. I walked to the cabinet. I took out the folder. I returned to the table. I placed it in front of me. I invited you tonight because I needed to talk to you, I said. My voice sounded firmer than I felt inside. I needed to show you something. Something important. I opened the folder. Julian looked at me, confused. Claire looked at the folder with suspicion. I took out the first document. I put it on the table. "This," I said, "is the beginning of a conversation we should have had a long time ago." The first document I put on the table was the complete list of all the loans I had given them over the last year and a half. Every date, every amount, every promise of repayment that was never fulfilled. Julian looked at it, not fully understanding what was happening. Claire stiffened in her chair. "What is this?" my son asked. "It's a record," I replied calmly, "of every time you asked me for money, every time I gave without asking, every time you promised to pay it back and never did. In total, it's $2,400 in a year and a half." Julian took the paper. He read it. His face turned pale. I didn't know it was that much." Claire intervened quickly. "Julian, your mother is exaggerating. Those weren't loans. That was family help. That's what families do. They help each other." I looked at her directly. "You're right, Claire. Families do help each other, but families also visit each other. They call. They care about each other. When was the last time you two came to see me without needing money?" The silence that followed was dense, heavy. Julian stared at his plate. Claire held my gaze, trying to look outraged, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was assessing the situation, trying to understand how far I was willing to go. "But that's not what I really want to talk about tonight," I continued. I took out the second set of documents, the bank statements Damien had gotten. I put them on the table. "I want to talk about this." Julian took the papers. He began to read them. His confusion transformed into something else: concentration, surprise. "What are these accounts?" he asked, looking at Claire. "I don't recognize these account numbers." Claire shifted in her chair. "I don't know what your mother is talking about. Where did you get this, Eleanor? These documents are private. You had no right to get them." I leaned back in my chair. I kept my voice calm. "I had every right when I'm being asked to pay the installments on a car because you supposedly don't have money. I had every right when you tell me you need $1,200 for an urgent repair. I had the right to investigate if it was true." "Julian," I said, looking at my son, "those accounts are in Claire's name. They are 3 accounts she has without you knowing. In them, there is over $48,000. Money she has been diverting from the joint account you share. $2,000 every month for the last 2 years." My son stared at the papers as if they were in another language. "That can't be true," he muttered. "Claire, tell me this isn't true." Claire stood up. Her face was red. The sweetness was gone from her voice. "How dare you? How dare you investigate me? Stick your nose into our finances?" I looked at her without flinching. "Sit down, Claire. I'm not finished yet." Something in my tone must have startled her because she hesitated. She looked at Julian for support, but he was still staring at the documents. She finally sat down, but her posture was defensive. Arms crossed, jaw tight. I took out the next document, the deed to the apartment. I put it on the table. "This is an apartment that Claire bought 2 years ago. $120,000. It's in her name only. She rents it out for $1,200 a month. Money that goes into one of those secret accounts." Julian took the document. His hands were shaking. "You bought an apartment? With what money? When?" Claire was no longer responding. She stared at the table. Her strategy had changed, from attack to silent defense. "There's more," I said. I took out the documents for Claire's other car. She also has another car. She bought it 4 months ago, $35,000, paid in cash. While she was asking you to ask your mother to pay the installments on your car because you didn't have money. Julian let the papers fall to the table. He put his face in his hands. He was breathing heavily. "I can't believe this. I can't believe it." "Julian," Claire said finally. Her voice had changed. It was no longer aggressive. It was soft, manipulative. "My love, let me explain. Those accounts are savings. They're for our future, for when we have children. I didn't tell you because I wanted to surprise you." I laughed. I couldn't help it. A bitter laugh. "Surprise him? By hiding almost $50,000 from him while you had him ask his mother for money? That's some surprise." Claire shot me a look full of hatred. "You don't understand anything. You're just a bitter old woman who can't stand to see her son happy with me. That's why you're doing this. That's why you're inventing these lies." I stood up. I walked to where she was. I leaned in slightly to be at her level. "I haven't invented anything, Claire. Every document here is real. Every number is verifiable. And I'm still not finished." I went back to my place. I took out the last set of documents. The photos, the dates, the locations, the entire record of her relationship with Arthur. I put them on the table one by one. Julian picked them up with trembling hands. It was obvious what they showed. Claire with another man, kissing, entering hotels, embracing. Each photo had the date and time in the bottom corner. Irrefutable proof. "Who is this man?" Julian asked in a broken voice. All the color had drained from his face. He looked like he was going to be sick. Claire was silent. There was no defense possible. The photos were clear, unquestionable. "His name is Arthur Vance," I answered. "A businessman. Married. Claire has been seeing him 2 or 3 times a week for over a year." Julian shot up from his chair so fast it fell over backward. "You're cheating on me? All this time, you've been cheating on me?" His voice was rising. Tears began to roll down his cheeks. Claire stood up too. She tried to touch him, but he pulled away. "Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me." His voice was pure pain, pure betrayal. "Julian, please," she begged. "That doesn't mean anything. You're the one I love. You're my husband." He shook his head. He backed away until he was against the wall. "The one you love? Is this how you treat someone you love? By stealing from them? Lying to them? Cheating on them?" He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. He was sobbing. My adult son was sobbing like I hadn't seen him sob since he was a child. Claire turned to me. Her mask had finally fallen completely. What I saw on her face was pure fury. "This is your fault," she spat the words. "You destroyed my marriage. You and your sick jealousy. Your need to control your son. You can't stand that he made a life for himself." I walked toward her. I looked her straight in the eyes. "I didn't destroy anything, Claire. I just showed what was already destroyed. What you destroyed with your manipulation, with your lies, with your greed. You don't know anything," she said. Her voice trembled with rage. "You don't know what it's like to live with someone mediocre, someone who's never going to be more than what he is. I needed to secure my future. I needed to have something of my own because Julian was never going to give me the life I deserve." Those words fell like stones. Julian lifted his head. He looked at her as if he were seeing a stranger. "Mediocre," he repeated. "Is that what I am to you? Mediocre." Claire realized what she had said. She tried to backtrack. "No, my love, I didn't mean that. I'm upset. Your mother has me upset with all these accusations." But it was too late. The words had been spoken. The truth was out. Julian stood up. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. "I want you to leave," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Get out of this house, now." "Julian, please." Claire tried to approach him again. "We can talk about this. We can fix this. Go to therapy. Whatever it takes. But don't throw away our marriage like this." He shook his head. "There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to save. It was all a lie. Everything. From the beginning." He turned to me. "Mom, can I stay here tonight? I can't go back to that apartment." I felt my heart expand in my chest. "Of course you can, son. This is your home. It will always be your home." Claire looked at both of us. The rage on her face was now mixed with something else. Fear, maybe, or panic. She was realizing that she had lost, that her game was over. "You're going to regret this," she said. Her voice was venomous. "Especially you, Julian. You'll come crawling back. You'll beg me to forgive you. Because without me, you are nothing." "Leave," Julian repeated. Firmer this time. Claire grabbed her bag. She walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "You won, Mrs. Chavez. You got your son back. I hope it's worth it. Because what you just did was sink him. Without me, without my money, without my contacts, he's not going anywhere. She opened the door. She left. She slammed it shut so hard the walls trembled. The silence that remained was overwhelming. Julian was still standing in the middle of the living room, staring at the door his wife had just walked out of. His life had just exploded. Everything he thought was real had turned out to be a lie. I approached him, slowly, as if he were a wounded animal that might bolt at any moment. "Son," I said softly. He turned to me, and he collapsed. He fell into my arms, sobbing. I held him. Like when he was a child, like when he had nightmares, like when the world was too big and terrifying. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said between sobs. "I'm so sorry. You were right. About everything. I was a fool. I was a terrible son. I abandoned you. I used you. And you never stopped looking out for me." I stroked his hair. "Shh. It's over. It's over. You're here now. You're safe." We stayed like that for a long time, until his tears ran out, until his breathing calmed. He finally pulled away from me. He wiped his face. "How did you find out all this?" he asked. "How did you get all that information?" I sat on the sofa. I motioned for him to sit next to me, and I told him everything. About Damien, about the investigation, about Claire's pattern, about the other families she had destroyed. He listened in silence, processing, finally understanding the magnitude of what he had lived through. "She almost did it," he said finally. "She almost separated me from you completely. She almost convinced me that you were the problem." I took his hand, but she didn't. Because true love always finds a way, and I was never going to give up on you. "What do I do now?" he asked. He sounded lost, like a child. "Now, you rest," I said. "Tomorrow, we start to fix your life, to get back what she took from you. But tonight, you just rest. Here, at home." He nodded. He lay back on the sofa. He closed his eyes. Within minutes, he was asleep, exhausted from the emotional night. I covered him with a blanket. I turned off the lights. I gathered all the documents from the table. The dinner was left unfinished. But it didn't matter, because I had achieved what I needed to. My son knew the truth. And although the road ahead was going to be difficult, at least we would face it together. Julian slept on the sofa all night. I barely slept at all. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, drinking tea and thinking about everything that had happened. Every so often, I would go to the living room to make sure he was still there, that it wasn't a dream, that my son had really come home. Every time I saw him sleeping under the blanket, his face finally relaxed after so much suffering, I felt a mixture of relief and pain. Relief, because he was here. Pain, because I knew the days to come would be terrible for him. When the sun began to stream through the windows, I made coffee. The aroma woke him up. He sat up slowly. He looked disoriented for a moment. Then, the reality of the previous night returned to him. I could see his face transform, how the weight of it all settled back on his shoulders. "Good morning, son," I said from the kitchen. "Do you want some breakfast?" He nodded without saying anything. He got up. He went to the bathroom. When he came out, he sat at the table with me. I served him coffee, toast, and scrambled eggs, just how he liked them. He ate in silence. I didn't speak either. I knew he needed time to process, to fully wake up to this new reality. When he finished eating, he finally spoke. "I need to go to the apartment. I need to get my things before Claire does something." I looked at him. "Do you want me to go with you?" He shook his head. "No, Mom. I have to do this alone. But thank you." He left after I loaned him money for a taxi. He promised to be back in the afternoon. I was alone again. But this time, the silence was different. It was no longer the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of waiting, of knowing my son was coming back. I called Damien to tell him what had happened. He was glad. He told me I had done the right thing, that I had been brave. He offered legal help for Julian's divorce, to recover the money Claire had stolen from him. I thanked him. I told him I would talk to my son about it. Julian returned at 6 in the afternoon. He was carrying 2 suitcases with clothes, a box with books and some personal items. He looked exhausted, devastated. "Claire wasn't there," he said, leaving everything in the living room. But she left a note. She said her lawyer will be contacting me about the divorce, that I shouldn't try to contact her, that I've already caused her enough problems. He sat down heavily on the sofa. It's unbelievable. She robbed me. She cheated on me. She lied to me for years, and she still plays the victim. I sat next to him. That's how people like her operate, son. They never accept responsibility. They always find someone else to blame. He nodded. He looked around the living room. Can I stay here for a while? Just until I get my life in order. I'll look for my own apartment. I don't want to be a burden. I took his hand. You are not a burden. You are my son. And this house is as much yours as it is mine. Stay as long as you need. The first few days were difficult. Julian spent most of his time in his old bedroom. I had kept it exactly as it was when he left. His bed, his old posters, his school books, all the same. Sometimes I would hear him crying on the other side of the door. It broke my heart. But I knew he needed to go through that pain. He needed to let out everything he had been holding in. Margot came by every day. She brought food, sweets. She would sit with me in the kitchen, and we would talk in low voices so as not to bother Julian. She told me it was normal, that he was grieving, not just for the marriage, but for the life he thought he had, for the person he thought Claire was, for the lost time. Give him space, she advised me, but also let him know you're there. A week after the confrontation, Julian finally came out of his room at dinner time. He sat at the table. He helped me set the plates. We ate together, and after dinner, for the first time, he really talked. Mom, he said, I want you to know that I get it. I understand everything I did wrong, how I abandoned you, how I used you, how I let Claire convince me that you were the problem when she was the one destroying me. I know, son, I said softly. She's very good at what she does. She manipulated you, just like she manipulated others before. He shook his head. No, Mom, I can't blame her for everything. I made the decisions. I chose not to visit you. I chose not to call you. I chose to ask you for money time and time again without paying you back. That was my fault, my responsibility. I was moved to hear him say it. Because acknowledging our mistakes is the first step to healing. How can you forgive me? He asked, with tears in his eyes. After everything I did to you, how can you welcome me into your home? Take care of me? Feed me? You should hate me. You should have closed the door on me. I got up from my chair. I went around the table. I hugged him from behind. Because you are my son, Julian. And a mother's love doesn't end because you make mistakes. It gets hurt. It bends. But it doesn't break. It never breaks. He cried in my arms again. But this time was different. It wasn't just pain. It was also release. It was letting go of the guilt. It was accepting forgiveness. When he calmed down, we talked for hours. About everything. About how it had started with Claire. How she had slowly pushed him away from me. How she made him feel that every visit to his mother was wasted time. How she told him I was too demanding. Too needy. That he had to set boundaries. And I believed her, he said. Because I wanted to be a good husband. Because I thought that meant putting my wife first. But it should never have meant abandoning my mother. I explained to him that putting your partner first doesn't mean erasing the rest of your family. That love isn't a competition. That there is room for everyone when love is genuine. He nodded. He understood now. But he had learned in the most painful way possible. The next day, Julian went to see Damien. They talked about the divorce, about how to recover the money Claire had taken. Damien explained that it was going to be difficult, that she probably had good lawyers, that she was going to fight, but that they had solid proof, that there was hope. Julian decided to fight, not for revenge, but for justice, to get back what he had worked so hard to earn. The following weeks were about slow rebuilding. Julian started looking for therapy. He needed to process everything he had been through. He needed to understand how he had fallen into that pattern, how he had allowed himself to be manipulated so much. I supported him. I gave him rides to his appointments when he didn't have a car. I made him his favorite food. I listened to him when he needed to talk. We also started doing things together. Simple things. watching movies in the living room, cooking together on Sundays, walking in the park, all those things we had stopped doing when Claire entered his life. And little by little, I began to see glimpses of the Julian I knew, of the son I had raised. He was still hurt, he was still healing, but he was coming back. A month after the confrontation, Margot organized a small dinner. She invited some neighbors, people who had known Julian since he was a child. It was strange at first. He felt ashamed. He knew everyone had noticed his absence for years, but everyone was kind. They welcomed him warmly. They told him they were happy to see him, that they had missed the cheerful boy who used to play in these streets. During dinner, Mrs. Peterson, the one I sewed dresses for, told Julian stories about me, about how I talked about him all the time, about how every time I sewed something, I would say I was saving up for when my son visited me, so I could take him out to eat, to buy him something nice. Julian listened in silence. When she finished, he had tears in his eyes again. "I didn't deserve a mother like that," he said in a low voice. "Yes, you did," I said. "We all deserve to be loved unconditionally." That night, after everyone had left, Julian and I sat on the front porch, looking at the stars as we used to do when he was little. "Mom," he said, "I'm going to make it up to you. For every lost moment, for every call I didn't make, for every visit I canceled, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be the son I should have always been." I looked at him. I smiled. "I don't need compensation, son. I just need you to be okay. To be happy. To learn from this and build a better life." "I will," he promised. "And this time, I'll do it right. This time, I'm not going to let anyone push me away from the people who really love me." I hugged him. And in that hug, I felt that we had finally closed a circle. The circle of pain, of abandonment, of manipulation. And we were starting a new one. A circle of healing, of reconnection, of true family. Things weren't perfect. Julian still had bad days. Days when the betrayal hit him all over again. Days when he doubted everything. But every day was a little better than the last. Every day, he seemed a little more like himself. And every day, I was thankful I'd had the courage to confront, to show the truth, because without that, I would have lost him forever. And now, seeing him sitting next to me, knowing he was home, that he was safe, that we were together again, I knew that every tear I had shed had been worth it. Because in the end, love always finds its way back home. 6 months have passed since that night. 6 months since the truth exploded at my dining room table and changed everything forever. I look back and barely recognize the woman I was then. That frightened woman who received a cold message asking her to pay for car installments. That woman who justified every abandonment, who settled for the crumbs of attention they gave her. That woman no longer exists. Julian lives with me now, not temporarily. He decided to stay while he finalizes his divorce and rebuilds his life. We managed to recover part of the money Claire had hidden. Not all of it. She had good lawyers, but enough for him to breathe, for him to start over without the burden of debt she had created. He sold the car. He said he didn't want anything that reminded him of that time. He prefers to take the bus. He says it gives him time to think. The mornings are different now. I wake up and hear noises in the kitchen. Julian making coffee. Sometimes he cooks breakfast. Other times, I do. We eat breakfast together. We talk about our plans for the day. About simple things. About life. And every morning, I am thankful for this moment I thought I would never have again. On Sundays, we cook together. He learned to make the roast chicken just how I like it. I taught him how to make his grandmother's apple pie. Margot comes over to eat with us. Sometimes we invite other neighbors. The house that was once so silent is now full of laughter, of conversations, of life. My son tells me he has never been happier, that everything he had before was just an appearance, empty luxury, that this simple life is what he always needed. Claire tried to come back. 3 months ago, she showed up at the door, crying, saying she had made a mistake, that she loved Julian, that they could start over. He listened to her, calm, serene, and he told her no, that he had learned that true love doesn't manipulate, it doesn't lie, it doesn't destroy. He thanked her for teaching him that lesson, even if it was in the most painful way. And he closed the door. That night, I hugged him. I told him I was proud of him. Damien became a friend of the family. He comes to dinner once a month. He likes my soup. He says it reminds him that there is always kindness in the world, even if it's sometimes hard to find. Thanks to him, Julian is also helping other people who have been victims of financial manipulation. He shares his story. He helps others see the signs he missed. He says that if his pain can help someone else, then it was worth it. I learned something important in these months. I learned that true love sometimes has to be strong. It has to set boundaries. It has to speak difficult truths. For years, I thought being a good mother meant accepting everything, giving everything, never complaining, but I was wrong. Being a good mother also means teaching your children that they deserve respect, that you deserve respect, that love is not omission, but shared dignity. I also learned that it's never too late to recover what you thought you had lost. I thought I had lost my son forever, that Claire had won, that I would end my days alone in this house, filling it only with memories. But I was wrong. Because true love always finds its way back. Even if it takes time, even if it hurts, it always comes back. Julian told me something a few days ago that made me cry. He told me that I had saved his life. That if I hadn't confronted Claire that night, he would have ended up completely destroyed. Without money, without family, without an identity. He told me that my courage taught him to be brave, too. To not stay in situations that hurt him just for fear of being alone. Tonight, as I write this in my mind, I look at my son asleep on the sofa. He was watching a movie and fell asleep in the middle of it. I put a blanket over him, I turn off the television, and I sit for a moment just to look at him. At this son I got back. At this second chance life gave us. And I think of all the women who are going through the same thing I went through, who feel that their children have forgotten them, who are only used when it's convenient, who have been erased from the very lives they created. And I want to tell them something. Do not stay silent. Do not accept crumbs when you deserve the whole feast. Do not justify the unjustifiable. Investigate if something doesn't make sense. Seek help. Set boundaries. And above all, remember that you too deserve dignity. That being a mother does not mean disappearing. It means teaching. And sometimes the most important lesson we can give is to show that self-love is not selfishness, but survival. My story didn't end the way I thought it would. It ended better. Because I didn't just get my son back. I got myself back. I got my voice back, my strength, my right to be treated with respect, and you can too. Now I ask you, have you ever felt that they tried to erase you from your own story? That you were only used when it was convenient? How did you face that situation? Tell me in the comments, because your stories matter. Your voices matter. And together, we can remind each other that it is never, ever too late to reclaim our place in our own lives. Thank you for joining me on this journey, for listening to my story, for being here. God bless you, and may you never forget your worth.